Welcome to the ListenUp podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Mark Syms here. I'm the host of the ListenUp podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. Past guests include a good friend of Dr. Shannon and myself, Mason Walker, the president of Audiology. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so they can connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about helping patients with hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First from his hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then again when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the ear of ENT, who's performed over 10,000 surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of Arizona Hearing Center. I'm the author of ListenUp. Go to listenuphearing.com about the book. For more information about my hearing care practice, go to www.azhear.com. Today, I'm excited to have Dr. Jeff Shannon on ListenUp. He's the owner and director of Hudson Valley Audiology Center in New York. He has amazing credentials. He has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and then received a doctorate in audiology from University of Louisville in Kentucky. He then began his career in Portland at the Veterans Administration National Center for Rehabilitative Auditory Research, where he helped develop and improve diagnostic testing, treatment devices, and management services for veterans with hearing loss, tinnitus, and auditory processing problems. Upon returning to New York, he joined and now runs Hudson Valley Audiology Center. He's a rock star in advocacy and leadership. He's involved in hearing care on a local, state, and national level. He has a radio show and podcast called Up Rocklin. I think we have similar titles in the shows because we have the same mindset about hearing loss and the community impact and advocacy. I'm incredibly privileged to have a master of his craft join us today. Dr. Shannon, welcome to ListenUp. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, sure. It's great, Jeff. You know, one of the things I always love to get from people is like, so how did you end up in audiology? Like, you know, what was your path? I mean, you obviously have the credentials and stuff, but like, what was that aha moment or this is where I'm going moment for you?
Yeah, sure. So starting in electrical engineering at the University of Dayton in Ohio, I worked in IT for a couple of years. And I was just looking for something a little more direct to, making an impact on people's lives. I would always say I was a doctor of computers. So actually after that, I actually became a high school math and science teacher, because if you're not going to impact people's lives, I don't know how else than doing that. My mother was a teacher for 34 years. So I think there was some influence there. But then what happened is I met at the time, my girlfriend, who was studying to become a speech language pathologist. She needed help in a class called Introduction to Audiology. I'd never heard of audiology. I started learning more about it. I became very interested because of the physics and the acoustics and the technology and the fact that you're using this technology to essentially help people. And I started to really dive into that. Long story short, we both ended up going to graduate school at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. Erin, is now a speech language pathologist, and I'm an audiologist. So I always say I didn't know how to thank her enough, so I proposed to her, and that was my thank you. So now we have 3 kids, and we're here in New York, and we have this practice, and
that's great. So your love took you to your love of audiology.
That's right.
That's awesome.
I'll start using that.
That's a great story, right? I mean,
yeah.
And it's always amazing how people end up, they kind of stumble into it. And it sounds like it's a mesh of technical, teaching, and care. And it's all those things. And that's one of the things I think audiology is a great profession. So, and you and I both, mine's ListenUp, yours is Up Rocklin. It's amazing, the proverbial, like minds. Why did you start that show?
Yeah. Probably a very similar reason, so it was the idea of getting people educated and interested in just having the discussion about hearing loss, audiology, hearing aids, technology, having more awareness. And so, Listen Up and it's a radio show that we have once a month that like I was saying before, it's turned into a podcast now. It's called Up Rocklin. And so we have local listeners, usually local, sometimes, nationally, but that call in and ask questions. And it's just another way to get the word out there.
That's great.
and have these types of discussions.
I got to think about doing a call-in show. I've got a lot going on, but that's a whole nother thing.
Careful what you wish. What you
Yeah,
think.
right. So, one of the things that you and I both are aligned about is getting more people to treat this disease called hearing loss, right? And so, there are patients come in and you explain to them they have a hearing loss, and then they give you, different reasons or explanations, or they still have questions that are unanswered. So I wanted to talk about some of them. And, like if I said to you, well, thanks, Dr. Shannon, I know I have hearing loss, but, I'm not really in a big hurry to do anything. Like, how do you deal with that when you talk to patients? What do you tell them?
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about that first interaction. By the time you, Mark, would have come into the office, we want to know, how was your experience getting here? All right. Are you frazzled because you got lost? Why are you here? Who brought you here? How did you hear about our office? Right? Are you dragging your feet walking down my hallway, coming into my door? Or are you kind of more motivated, or is a family member has brought you in? Like, what is your story? Right?
Let's say I'm not very motivated. My wife brought me in, and I don't think it's a big deal. And, I know I have some hearing loss, but I don't think I have to do anything about it.
Right. Or at least not now, right?
Now, right. About now.
Right. So in the, we call this and I like that you said that objections are oftentimes just unanswered questions, right? So in that no hurry situation, what are we not hurried about, right? And usually it boils down to, in that no hurry situation, you have three options, right? Option number one is to actually consider and being open to starting a treatment process now, right? Taking action now. And here's what it entails. It's actually a trial, right? It's not actually, you're committing to anything per se. You're committing to starting a trial, right? Option two is to actually just maybe leave and go somewhere else and start this process all over again, or take what you've learned here and take it somewhere else. And then option three is just to do nothing, right? Leave the office, think about it maybe, and maybe I'll see you back in months, maybe years, maybe decades, right? And that's happened, right?
Yeah,
So when I present the patient with those options, they start to kind of think about like, well, yeah, what do I want to do? And if your wife is there, now that is a huge help, because now I'm getting the other side of the story.
The person really suffering the hearing loss.
Right. The hearing loss affects you, but the hearing problem affects everybody around you. Right. And those are the people that they care for you and you care for them. If your wife had this hearing loss, what would you tell her to do? Right. Would you tell her to think about it? Right. So the idea there is to try to, let's mitigate the risk. Like, let's talk about what is the risk of doing this? What is the risk of not doing it? And, we can go into the social situations that we've usually covered at that point, or almost always covered, as far as why you're here. But also, we can go into the medical side too, of talking about, cognitive decline and brain atrophy and those things that we're slowly finding more and more about, and, a modifiable risk factor, right? And so there's the medical side as well. And then, let's just like professionally, confidently and comfortably, like, let's present you with some treatment options. Because I would ask you, what is your experience with hearing aids? When you hear the word hearing aid, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I would tell you, if I could, a lot of my patients, I have three friends with hearing aids, right? One got them and returned them. The other one got them and they put them in their nightstand drawer. And then my third friend wears them and they don't hear very well.
Right. So the first one, tried them out and bad experience. The second one, I would say the most expensive hearing aids are the ones that sit in the drawer. They don't help anybody here sitting in a drawer, right? And usually my comment back to that, and I've yet to have somebody say yes to this, is, are any three of those patients our patients? And I've never had that happen.
Right.
Now, maybe I'm just lucky, but more often than not, something has gone wrong, right? Because the things that our patients, and the things I always say that I need to hear you tell me, let's say like three things. Number one, I can't even tell that I'm wearing them, right? I need to hear you tell me that. They need to be comfortable. Secondly, you know what? They're really easy to put in, and they're secure. I'm not worrying about like losing them or worrying about I have this piece of equipment on my head or my ears, right? They need to be very secure, and I need to be comfortable getting them. I need to commit 30 seconds a day to put them in correctly. And then lastly, I need to hear you say, I'm hearing better in X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I'm actually, my expectations have been exceeded, right? And, part of that is that's my responsibility to you. That's my commitment to you. Your commitment is just showing up. You got to show up. You got to wear them. Let's see what we can do here, right? And then, that usually that kind of delivery can begin the consideration of picturing what it could be like, being a little more open to it, and maybe getting a tad excited about it, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's the look to the spouse. What do you think, right? And then depending on that spouse, it could be like that, or it's like,
well, it's up to you.
Yeah, it's up to you. Like, okay, well, like, do you want me to give you a moment? What do you need from me? Right. And the bottom line is that they still may leave, and that's okay, because we all need to digest big decisions, and sometimes the wife is not there, and you do need to talk to your wife, right? And that's okay, but we're not, we're still here, and we're going to be, let's reach out. Do you want to set up another appointment? Do you want me to call your doctor? Who should I send this report to besides your doctor? Is it anybody else? Right? So just really throwing it out there. What information can I give to you to help make this decision for you and help you with that? So really kind of putting yourself out there for them, and knowing that, my work begins the day you say yes, and it goes forward from there.
That's great. It's great stuff, really. I mean, and important for people to understand those types of things. I mean, this is in everybody's mind.
Right. And I think it's also important to understand that that's possible. It's just a matter of finding the right professional. In your line of work, it's a little easier because you want to find that right doctor, that right surgeon. People aren't thinking about, well, do I want this surgery or that surgery? Whereas far too often it's focused on the technology, and we need the technology. Like, I need good technology. I need great technology to fit, my patients right and correctly. But it really boils down to, the professional fitting them.
Craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Right. I agree 100%, and that's the message, right?
Right.
The person doing all of this and explaining it all to you matters incredibly more than perhaps the hearing aid itself.
That's right. And so, as I was, we were having a conversation before this about, is this a new patient that's first time to our office, or is this an existing patient? And those are two very different, conversations we're having. Typically with the existing patient, they get it, right? They're talking more about, tell me what's new, right? Tell me what can I expect better? What's the newest out there? And this might be a conversation a year later, 2 years later, or it might be 7 years later. And, that conversation's easier because there's been a great deal of technology improvement. And then, are they my patient, or are they one of my providers, right? Who ended up with this patient? Usually they're staying with the same provider, but not always. The new patient is usually the one that people, that's the conversation we're typically having with somebody brand new, where they're sizing you up. They want to, you need to be your best. You need to connect with them, right? And they need to be like, this provider, this doctor knows me. He gets me. He understands where I'm at, and I'm going to give this a shot.
Right. And so, one of the things that I'm always interested in is how do you help people? I mean, obviously, I think the spouse is helpful, but people say, well, I'm not too worried about it. I don't think it really impacts me. How do you draw that out when they really get people to transform from the fact that actually they maybe even have told you that it bothers them, because they'll tell you, I can't hear in restaurants, but how do you put that all together for them?
Yeah. So it can be something, one of the simplest questions we ask our patients is on the intake is, how would you rank your hearing on a scale of 1 to 10? Or if they're a tinnitus patient, how would you rank the annoyance or the loudness of your tinnitus on a scale of 1 to 10? And that gives us a gauge of where they're at, right, with all of this. Typically 7 or lower, they're they're going to be motivated to treat this. But sometimes we get the 8 or the 9 that has a hearing loss that does not coincide with that that perception. Or it's just like you said, maybe it's just restaurants, right? I'm hearing you fine right now, right? In this office. I don't know why, this is why you're recommending this. But we can get into the fact that this is a quiet office. It's got carpet. It's you and me. I'm trained to speak to you clearly and enunciate my words. But let's go to the restaurants. If you want to improve those restaurants, here's how we do that, right? If that's your main objective. Oh, by the way, you're going to improve in other areas too. I can almost guarantee it. And the way that you can really know for sure is to try something on. If you're open to doing that, why don't we try this out and we'll see what happens. And then you can decide how much it helps you in the restaurants, right? So usually my first homework assignment is, if the spouse is there, you need to take her to a restaurant tonight. Are you okay with doing that? Get into that environment. And then let's come back and talk. Now, granted, they need to also understand we have adjustments to make. We have testing and verification to do here and validation. There's going to be some things you love and there's some things that you don't love. And I expect that. And that's where our work begins here, right? And that's what usually, a lot of times you can't get over the internet or something that's mailed to you and something like that. So they kind of start to see the difference there of what they can expect here.
Yeah. No, I think those are all incredibly important things, right?
Yeah.
People don't have the average ear canal. They have their own ear canal, and generating a computer-generated program or prescription off of a algorithm that you human being ear canal, not a custom fit by any stretch.
Yeah.
Pick up a suit, right? It's like getting off the rack or getting a tailor fit your suit.
That's right. And far too often, to be completely honest, many times it's just the device just doesn't fit well. If I had something that was annoying my ear, you know how long I would leave it in my ear? I don't care how high end it is. If it hurts, I'm not wearing it, right? I'm taking it out. And so sometimes, at least in our, work, that's a simple fix. But, we've seen patients that have walked around for a long time with something that just doesn't fit right. And they just they've just been sort of like put up with that. But then you're right. Then you're getting into the programming, the connectivity. I always say nowadays, I feel like I work for Apple, I work for Samsung, I work for TV companies, sound bars, right? Because we are in the business of communication.
Right.
And now with more technology, that requires more levels of communication, and we need to cover all of that. So it's exciting and it's great because there's even more aha moments. Right. But we have to be ready for that and trained well on that.
So as patients go along after you fit, what type of testing, do you do in terms of validation or making sure that they're fit?
On the treatment side?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. They've already.
Yeah. So let's say you're coming back. So one of the first appointments coming back actually is not usually verification, depending on the patient, unless they're a long existing patient where they've been wearing devices for a long time. Usually it's just sort of let's check your data log. Let's see if your data log matches with your log, right? Are you wearing them regularly, right? How many hours a day are you wearing them? What environments have you been in actually? How have you been manipulating the device if you have, right? Sort of that sort of stuff. How is it fitting? How's it feeling? Is it annoying? What's annoying? Let's talk about that. Let's get that out in the open. But anyways, usually it's the second or third appointment where we're now diving into this machine, one of the machines that we have here behind me called real ear verification. And that's where we're putting probe microphones into the ear canal, verifying its correct placement, putting the devices on, and listening to recorded speech that contains the speech sounds that are necessary to verify that you're getting all the speech audibility and comfort that you need, right? That is one of the gold standards that unfortunately not very many practices do in general. And it just baffles me. It saves time. It's black and white, which is usually what audiologists love, right? We want to hit our targets.
Too, right? You're an
What's
engineer.
that?
Part of it's your engineering background. Too.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I agree with you 100%, but that's why you get it real quick.
Yeah. And that's why when I sit an engineer down here and they're asking, or even a musician, or, they want to know what these lines and dots mean. Like it's a counseling tool as well, right? So there's that part, but then there's validation. And so that is actually going back into some environments that are, trying to, experience the real world here. So we'll go back into the sound booth and we'll play some noise and we'll play some speech and we'll see how you do with in that sort of restaurant per se environment.
Testing.
That validation testing. Let's compare our pre and post and what's going on there. Let's see how else we can improve those settings for the patient. So that's what patients should expect. If they're going to go somewhere, throw out that term real ear measures and see how they respond quickly. Right. And look for it in their office.
I agree 100%.
So that's just some of the ways.
So Jeff, how good do you think patients are at actually perceiving their hearing loss?
That's a good question.
Because I always tell patients, you don't know what you don't hear.
You always tell patients what?
You don't know what you don't hear.
That's true. So, I don't have to tell you this, but, for the listeners, hearing usually takes years or decades to develop, right? And so our brains are amazing at adapting, at, it's filling in the gaps per se, right? And so versus, let's say somebody had a mild to moderate hearing loss or even worse, and you woke up the next morning with that hearing loss, chances are you might be going directly to the ER or calling your doctor. Something has gone wrong and you need it. But when it's happened over this time, right, that you've learned to adapt, it's different, right? How they perceive that. And let's talk about those perceptions, because not only are they thinking about their hearing loss, they're saying, what do we think about when we say the words hearing loss? Aging, getting old. I don't want to go somewhere because I'm going to have to buy that expensive thing. Oh, by the way, my friend has it and it doesn't work. Right. So all of this is out there that we I would say as audiologists, we have such a hill to climb, but when you make that, I always say, thank you for making this appointment because it may have been years before they actually came in here. And how they perceive this could be something that they're ready to take action, but usually it's not, right? They're hesitant. And so it's our job to not only, test accurately and distribute that information to them in a clear, concise way, but now we need to recommend something if they need hearing technology in a way that is comfortable for them to do, right? But the signs, we all know the signs and symptoms of, well, we do, but, the reality of the restaurant, the television, asking to repeat, if you have tinnitus or dizziness for that matter, your family.
I always say the grandchildren are the truth sayers, right? Because they have no filter. So they'll turn to their parents and go, Grandma and Grandpa, they don't hear very well, right? Because they don't know about the social reasons not to say that, right?
Yeah. And I always say we get our eyes checked usually regularly. We hopefully get our teeth checked regularly. Why are we not going to get a baseline hearing test, right? Just getting that done, setting a baseline. And that's great if you do. Now you know where things are. Right. And now if you ever go somewhere in the future, you know where your hearing once was, right? So always encouraging people to do that. And then there's always those medical reasons to get your hearing tested as well.
Yeah, that's great stuff, really. I mean, this is stuff that's really amazing stuff for taking care of patients and getting them to get hearing care that they need. I think your insights are excellent. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
One of the things I always like to ask people is so say, you're accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Who do you thank? Who are the people who had the most impact on you, and who do you thank?
Oh man. So for me personally?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
your wife, I think.
Yeah. I think I'd have to, I wouldn't have been in this profession if it wasn't for her. I don't know where I would be, but it probably wouldn't have been audiology. Maybe, but probably not. I would have never, discovered audiology. Maybe. So absolutely, I need to thank my wife, Erin. So if she ever listens to this, thank you, Erin.
That's great.
I was a little more of a non-traditional student per se. Many audiologists, for those that don't know,
straight through.
They're straight through. And also they start out in speech pathology or communicative disorders. And so actually our profession is mostly female.
Right.
And that's, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just, it's an interesting twist on a lot of the medical professions. Now it's actually turning to be more male, I think. But that's interesting because a lot of these students are saying, like, I really like the hearing loss, the science, not that speech pathology is not, scientific, but it's just a different area. But anyways, to answer your question, my parents have always championed me into, it's okay to not know, right? Because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? Where I was going.
That's great.
I had a very torturous, so I would definitely thank them for sure. And then finally, the woman that I bought this practice from, Dr. Angela Lovenbrook, she was a pioneer in audiology. She wrote the first book on hearing aids. She was past president of AAA. To come to this opportunity and be under her and to learn from her was a really amazing experience that I need to give credit to her.
That's great. It's always wonderful if you can find a mentor or somebody who can help you. That's right. As we always say, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? The people who really helped us get here. It's not, we didn't just appear all of a sudden. Well, everybody, we've been talking to Dr. Jeffrey Shannon from the Hudson Valley Audiology Center and host of ListenUp Rocklin. Jeff, where can people learn more about you? You're a rock star. People should be flooding your office to get your expertise.
So most people are online. Our website is hudsonaudiology.com. So you can find us here. We're about 20 miles north of New York City, Manhattan. I would say we're in New York's backyard. We're a nice, beautiful drive up the Palisades Parkway up here. So we have our website. We have a Facebook page. If you want to reach out to me personally, my email is drjeff, DRJEFF at hudsonaudiology.com. That's probably the best way to reach us, and we'll go from there.
And I think people, you clearly get that he's going to answer your questions, and really is a master of his craft. So thanks again, Jeff. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you for having me on, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.